Welcome to The Disruption Is Now. Join us on this enlightening journey as we explore how AI is impacting our jobs, careers, lives, and the human experience. Each episode, host Greg Matusky will converse with visionaries and innovators at the forefront of AI, diving into its challenges, opportunities, and impact. So buckle up as we venture into the heart of disruption, and together, let's unfold the future.
Well, welcome to another episode of The Disruption Is Now, the podcast where we talk about everything AI, particularly in how it impacts communications, and today, how it's impacting public relations. It's certainly a love of mine because I'm also the president and founder of Gregory FCA. And I have on a really exciting guest. I call him the czar of PR, the prince of media pitching. He's a gentleman who has taught more people in public relations how to approach the media and how to present to the media in a very respectful and effective way. Michael Smart is the founder of Smart PR, and he gives training all across this country of PR publicists and how to interface with the media. Michael, did I get that right?
Nailed it.
The czar of PR.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. I mean, I have never called myself the czar of PR, but I think I will start, thanks to you.
Well, I also had the master of media relations, but I went with the czar of PR because it was more poetic. So anyway, It's great to have you here. Over your course of your career, you've trained many people in advising them how to approach the media, which is very important in the world of public relations and continues to be. Media relations, I still think, is a pillar of our industry because of the great credibility it confers on companies and individuals. And you've even, a lot of people in the firm here at Gregory FCA were very excited to hear from you today because they follow you very closely.
I appreciate your support of your agency through the years.
Well, tell us a little bit about let's start with your story. How does somebody become so specialized in the world that there's a demand for a full-time expert on approaching the media?
Yeah, want to get rich, target a niche, right? You've heard that saying before. I wish I could say that I had heard it and I was strategic, but instead it was a nice serendipitous path that led us to this day. I was a working PR pro, like all of your team, like you were back in the day. I went to professional development conferences back when we used to do those in person in big cities. And I would sit and listen to the presenters, and I started to think, I think I could do this. And I filled out some RFPs. And I started speaking about the media relations successes that we were having, and people liked it. And people walked up out of this crowd and asked me what I charged, and I made up a number off the top of my head, right? And then I started flying around and eventually started making more on my vacation days, flying around training people how to pitch than I did from my full-time job. So then it was pretty easy to lean into this. And now, rather than flying around the country, I run the largest membership program for PR pros called the Smart PR Inner Circle, where people can learn from their desks.
And there's a lot to be learned, particularly when it comes from the media. It's always a mystery to people outside the industry. Someone once called it the black art. I don't know if that's accurate or not. But
well, I appreciate the way you framed my approach as respectful. I call it media friendly, because that's really the only way to succeed long-term, right? You can fool them once, but you can't fool them twice. And the best PR pros have relationships so that it doesn't matter what the subject line is of your email pitch. They just see your name. Oh, it's Greg Matusky. I'm opening this. And that's when you can really bring leverage on behalf of your clients.
You know, it is interesting in this world of AI. We've had this conversation. It's not good at generative AI is not good at creating pitches. And one of the things I mentioned to you, you can correct me, but I don't think it's ever been trained on that. There's no training data on how to approach the media. Certainly, it's one of the most guarded pieces of free speech in the world, interfacing with the media. I mean, there's nowhere you can get into a reporter's email or even a publicist's email. And that creates an interesting challenge, doesn't it?
Yeah. So I think it has been trained on something, because when you ask it to write a media pitch, 99 out of 100, it starts it with, "I hope you're well." Which is comical because I once wrote an ebook about journalist complaints on Twitter, what they most frequently complain about. And guess what we titled the ebook?
I hope
you're well.
Hope you're well.
Journalists hate hearing about in your emails. So it's kind of like any info you get from a ChatGPT or any generative AI product on the first prompt. It's the mediocre, most average content. So it's probably seen some ebooks where people threw up, oh, it's hope you're well, da 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 da. We in the inner circle, we have several hundred pitches that people have shared that are exceptional. But that's behind a paywall, to your point. Like, you can't just go and get these pitches to train the bot about.
You know, I even hate using the word pitch because I find that, well, I'm a big ChatGPT 4 user, 4.0. And when you use the word pitch, it reverts to a very commercial marketing speak because it thinks you want an ad or you want an email pitch.
Sales pitch or an investment pitch. Right?
And, you know, it's been trained on a lot of great email marketing. So it defaults to that kind of approach, which doesn't work because, as you said, the subject line could mean nothing if the journalist knows the PR person and realizes they've given good content or access in the past. They're going to listen to them. So in that case, as we mentioned on a pre-call, it could be one sentence, right? Hey, would you like to interview my chairman about XYZ is available today at 2:00. That could be a pitch.
Or by extension, the flip side, you could be pitching a different beat that doesn't normally cover, in your case, you guys do a lot of finance, and you might actually have to spell out what SEC disclosure requirements means or something to somebody if they're a healthcare reporter, for example, and the bot may or may not be fine enough to make that distinction. I think, Greg, you and I we're lapsing into a pattern that I've fallen into that's caused some confusion among my audience. I know you're interested in hearing about this. Because I have made a career out of training people how to do media relations, which includes pitching, and I also now train people how to use AI, I think it's natural for them, if they're not paying close enough attention, to assume that I'm talking about using AI to pitch. But as we're talking about, it sucks at pitching right now. I mean, maybe GPT-5 will come out next week and we'll have to update this episode. But right now, it is terrible at any form of communication that's one-to-one, a narrowly targeted piece of writing that's supposedly coming from one particular individual. And that's the essence of a good media pitch. So
and that really is, I mean, it's many things it does well and many things it does not do well. And that's, we were speaking before this about the influencer and professor at Wharton, Ethan, how do you pronounce his name again? Malik.
Lado.
I just learned I've been saying it wrong. But Ethan has what he calls the jagged edge. And he puts on one side everything that generative AI does well. He puts on the edge things that need to be manipulated but still can have a result. Then he puts outside of that things it does not do well. And so on the outside is media pitching, I think, although there's workarounds, it can be moved a little bit closer to the line if you have some capabilities of knowing how to work the function. It doesn't do humor well, I don't think. I mean, it's never made me laugh with a joke. It just doesn't do humor well. But it does so many things well inside the jagged edge. And a lot of that has to do with, well, certainly content, which I think could be table stakes right now, that if PR people don't know how to use it as either an assistant or their co-writer, right, they're really missing an opportunity. And they're behind the 8 ball. And
yeah.
Then secondly, the second part is workflow, really making workflow more efficient, which we can talk about. But go ahead, I cut you off.
No, I'm sorry, I thought you were done. You say content's table stakes. I think you mean that it should be, but most PR pros are not using these tools, at least to their full potential to produce content. And that's where my AI training has been steered. I guess I'm known as a pitching guy, but what my mission is to help PR pros boost their communication results so they can get autonomy in where, when, and if they ever work again. And
Michael, I want to go down that path.
Okay.
So where are we in the people you speak to first on content?
So you've probably seen the same studies I have. Like Muckrack has a state of AI and PR study that says 2/3, 64% of PR pros have used generative AI in the last month. My experience is most of those are still at the dabbling phase, where if they think of it, they go and ask the bot the question, and sometimes it gets they get a good answer, and other times they don't. I think that's great. I think everybody should do that. There's a much smaller cohort, 10 to 15%, at least of the people of my followers, because that's the only group that I have this kind of dialogue with, who are actually trying to get it to do their work for or with them. You use the term workflow. I'll give you some of the most, the cream of the crop success stories. So I'm not saying these are representative even of people who lean into AI. These are like the best ones I could find. We've got Caitlin, who does social media. She usually takes 3 days a month to do a whole month's worth of her consumer or CPG company clients' posts, like 18 posts, and she's got that down to 1 day. We've got Emily, who's at a Fortune 500. I asked her, before you started using ChatGPT, 4 months before, what's a way you could gauge your productivity versus after? She hadn't done this before. It turns out she literally doubled the content that she puts out. Their press releases are pretty significant. They're data heavy. She did 3 in the 4 months before, plus what they call market reports. Think of it as like a detailed blog post, data-driven blog post. And then she was like, no way, I actually did 6 and 4 in the subsequent months once I started using ChatGPT. And then
that plays well into my theory. And, you know, Michael, we're big advocates here. And I was an early adapter. And I can tell you chapter and verse, great stories here within my own little world of how people have increased just not their productivity, but the quality of the product, of the work product, right? And as far as content, right, I think you can come within 85% right now if you're competent. What really amazes me is so many people think they should be able to sit down at a piano and play a Beatles song with generative AI. I mean, I see this over and over again. They try it. They go, oh, it read like a high school essay. And they don't understand all the features and all the capabilities and all the breaks and all the safeguards that you can put into it as far as RAG, as far as data, as far as knowledge, as far as rules, right? That will make it very similar to your own writing. You can put samples of your own writing in and say it and tell it to emulate it. You can ask it to critique your own writing and tell you who you write like. And when people do that, it always tends to be writers that they read a lot. Yeah, and it only makes sense, right?
Yeah,
they're influenced by others. So I'm disappointed somewhat. I feel this wave of people who weren't on board from the beginning, who are now jumping on it, and it's not living up to this unrealistic expectation of perfection, and so they attack it. I don't know. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I think that maybe that comes from the strange conversation around, and the media has driven this from the beginning, AI replacing jobs. And maybe PR pros are stuck on that word replace. It's like, duh, no way. There's no way it's good enough to replace somebody today. So maybe that's where that expectation comes of ship-worthy content on the first prompt, which, as you described, is totally impractical. The people that I've seen who engage with it the most naturally, like they didn't know how they would feel, and then they find themselves using it every day more and more, they use it as a writing partner. And when I look at their chats, and Greg, I know you love the study of writing. I think you've written a lot about it and analyzed some of your favorite writers like Malcolm Gladwell. Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I've done that too. I used to think I wanted to write for The Atlantic someday. And I find the process these folks use it very laborious. It would be slower for me to go back and forth with a bot on writing a press release to the extent that they do. But for maybe it's their level of experience in the field, or how well or poorly writing comes to them, this is a big skill. This upskills them, and their quality is better. The other dimension that I'm exploring, that fits more with the way that I like to work, is chunking down processes. And you alluded this with pitching. You said maybe there's an aspect of pitching that we can find a way to get the AI to help us with, not write the pitch for us. And just as an example, I'll give you an example for pitching and an example outside of pitching. For pitching, maybe I can crank out a 3-paragraph media pitch that's targeted and uses the right language and feel and style and approachability. Maybe I've been doing that for long enough that using the AI would slow me down. But what if I had a custom GPT that had the most recent 6 months worth of coverage of my target media? And then I came to it and said, hey, our client's announcing a new chip factory in Arizona. How could that possibly connect with the depth and breadth of coverage of these journalists? Give me 20 examples. And maybe one of those 20 will be one I hadn't thought of that would be better than the one I was going to think of. And then I crank out the pitch from there, right? So that highlights what I think is the biggest obstacle. This dawned on me after we did our pre-call last week. The biggest obstacle the PR pros adopting generative AI in an effective manner is our avoidance of process. Okay? Think how hard it is to get a PR pro to document a process of anything they do. And then compare that to like a computer coder or an engineer or an operating nurse. You know, they follow these checklists. Somebody new comes in, they can see what the old person did, but we're just like, read a bunch of their articles and write something that gets their attention, right? It's not documented anywhere. So I think if we do a better job of just set aside AI, just documenting how we do what we do, we'll be more likely to dawn on us, oh, that segment of the process, that's ripe for automation.
Well, it's interesting because I have a little different take, right? Okay. I think that the first time, I've been at this for 4 years in AI, right? And we set up a generative platform before ChatGPT. And then the first time I saw it, like I saw November, December of 2022, I was joyous. I giggled because I saw it and I said, finally, I can help other people become better communicators. And what triggered my mind was how flexible it was, right? Like if you're a coder, you want 2 + 2 = 4 every time. But if you're a writer, you know that you got 5 other people writing who could write just as good as you can, but may be dramatically different in the execution of a piece of content, right? So writers, I find, have very flexible minds, and they're never overwhelmed by its inconsistencies. And they embrace this lack of process to experiment and try and come at it. Yesterday, I was playing around. I saw one of the worst news releases I think I've ever seen. And I just wanted to play with it. So I put it in ChatGPT and I said, what's the most interesting news in this news release? Okay. It didn't come from me. I saw it on LinkedIn. I copied it and played it into ChatGPT-4. And it said, the really interesting thing is in paragraph 4, it says the new initiative's being managed by a former professional athlete. And I said, oh, that's great. Now, can you take this, get rid of there's so many words in this. It was purposely made to sound more important than it was, right? And slim it down and work in the fact that a former professional athlete is the manager of this, okay? And that flexibility resulted in a much more interesting news release that I'm sure we'd get a lot of pickup if that athlete's picture was now put in the release. So that kind of flexibility and lack of process for good writers, I think good writers have an advantage. Now, for those that are at the junior level, right, who need more support, and this is the whole debate between a Jasper and a ChatGPT. You know, the fascinating thing with ChatGPT is it's a generalized platform. It was released without any direction on what it should be able to do. Like that was up to you to figure out.
Yeah.
Now Jasper came out and it was very templated. Oh, this is how you write an email. This is how you write. And I looked at Jasper and I said, that's not me, man. That's not the way I approach these things. But for junior people, and this was borne out, you probably saw the Boston Consulting study, which showed the worst consultants who were educated in generative AI saw a 45% increase in the quality and velocity of their work product and came within 4% of the top performing consultants in Boston Consulting Group when they did the study. So I think with people who are new to this, that type of process is very important and usually isn't there. I think for people that are used to this, right, and know how to get to the meaning, the narrative, right, it releases you from lots of the data which cripples writers, and the data being the syntax, the Oxford commas, the verb tense, and it lets you just focus, going from the age of information, which is data, to the age of intelligence, which is meaning, which is communications, which is narrative, which is getting a response, right? That's intelligence. I'm not so sure knowing how, the right use of there or its is really intelligence. I think that's data. And so it's a fascinating thing. What I see is it comes back to me in my firm in many different ways. I have a young woman. She was an exquisite pitcher, very good at client relationships. Every review, it was a writing issue. She learned 5 prompts, 5 pillars of prompt writing, and her writing is now exceeding standard, right? Just how you lay it out. She needed that format, that process, like you said, to reach that level because she didn't know how to get there. So I guess my point is, I think it's very different for every kind of writer and every type of content creator. A couple of things you said is really interesting to me. That was the upskilling that I wanted to affirm from you, is this chunking down. What did you mean by chunking down?
Let me see if I can put that in the context. First of all, I love it when people on podcasts disagree. I think that friction makes for better outcomes. I think when I'm talking,
and I'm not really disagreeing with you. What I'm trying to say is,
I'm talking about process is different than you are. You're talking about the writing process. I'm talking about writing as one step of like a 10-step process. So before you even start writing, you kind of intuitively, your senior media relations pros, they read a headline, they intuitively know that is news that they can tie a client to. They know they need to check with the client, check their, you guys now have comments already produced instead of having to go and ask the client for them and get that approved. So I'm talking about, like, I was at an agency in New York a couple of weeks ago, and they just said, hey, how could I write a pitch about this? And we realized you had to break down, like, first we need to gather a bunch of relevant stats and data and see which of those would be the most interesting. First, we need to pick a time element or 3 that we would try. And that's what you need to start feeding into the bot. Instead of just saying, write me a pitch about why Florida is a good destination on World Oceans Day, it gives you out bland drivel because you didn't give it any more proprietary knowledge. But you can also use it to derive the proprietary knowledge and therefore write better prompts. That said, that was a pitch example. I don't want to go against myself. Don't use it for pitching yet. So that was a little bit of chunking down. Let me give you another example. I built a custom GPT to replace myself 15 years ago. I used to write case studies for this particular client. I had 16 of them. That's perfectly clean training data. I have the final, and then I have my notes that I used. And we don't want to get laborious on the process, but I trained the bot to take the case study from the notes phase to finish. The only reason it can do it successfully is it follows the exact same structure every time. Problem, the product, that's the clients, and then the results. And he always uses the same sort of metrics and things like that. So to your point about creativity and flexibility, it's not yet there where it's giving me like scintillating creative work, but Greg, I got this to be 80% as good as me, and it takes 10 seconds.
Yeah, that's the workflow process, right? Which I don't think there's enough concentration on. And that's the one area where people say, well, it'll never replace this or that. But there's so much friction in what we do for a living. And we've come to accept it as PR professionals, right? We accept the fact that we might miss deadlines with the media, not be able to get back. We accept the fact that some of us think we're artists, and every time you do a case study, it should be a different take.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And that's probably why I haven't been, it doesn't come naturally to me to optimize other types of content that I do.
Right.
For that reason.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it does that in amazing ways. I recently had a client and they asked us to update their crisis manual, which was done by who knows when or who knows where. And it was poorly done, right? But it had all the scenarios in it. And then I have a crisis manual that I cherish, that I think is really well done. We did it, within the last 2 years. And I simply ask it to take the scenarios from one and any good information that would be in there, delete and get rid of all the unnecessary, superfluous. There was a lot of warm up in it, right? Must have been done on an hourly basis because there was a lot like, what is a crisis and what have you? Well, it went on and on. And it took that and it used the original template and it was masterful. And it actually created additional scenarios, which I don't know how it did that. It wasn't the request. And that kind of thing, that was a 40-hour assignment, and that was cut down to 8 hours.
Yes. See, that's the problem when too many PR people hear replace, and they're like, they don't think about something still taking 8 hours, right? They think it's supposed to do it immediately. And I think maybe a word is augmenting. Instead of replacing us, it's augmenting us.
You're right. And why would it take 8 hours? You still have to read it line by line, right? There were still elements where there was still an additional segment that I had to add to it, right? We had to add to it. But, that's a dramatic time savings. Now, when you brought up the young woman who had done her database blog posts.
Yeah.
Right. She's increasing the velocity of her work and the quantity of her work. Okay.
And just to say the quality is still there. It's the same, because that's another common misconception. I even had people, when I asked my followers about, am I too bullish on AI? What do you think? For some reason, there's an assumption that I'm talking about you hit enter on the prompt, copy, paste, send. No, like you said, you still read it line by line and you still edit it so that it sounds like you. People are worried about AI detection. It should never be, it will always pass an AI detection because you're going to change it so it doesn't sound like an AI wrote it. You're going to sound like you wrote it. Right.
And we have a whole training session here on detecting AI written pieces and what the tip-offs are, right? They're the common words, the metrics, the delve, right?
Yeah.
And people do this. They study. There was a study that showed how common these words that weren't common have become more common since AI. The vapid language,
right,
which makes an assertion and doesn't back it up with a fact or a statistic, that unemployment's at a 20-year low or unemployment's low. And they don't give the actual number, and that's a tip-off of AI. And then always this really vapid opening that reads something like, in today's increasingly competitive world, which, as you know, is the cheapest opening on the face of the earth. But obviously the training models have seen that many times,
right?
Are all tip-offs.
Mm-hmm.
I find you can add it. And think of the value of that example you gave. Now she's doing 6 blog posts, okay? Do you really think her organization thinks less of her or more than her?
Yeah, right. I even asked her, because there's more. Since she did that test, the sales team, she's on the comms team, the sales team's been asking her to write tricky emails to customers and update some content on their internal customer page. And I wrote back and I said, Emily, I hope you're got some boundaries in your life, you know, because you're so productive now, you're going to keep getting asked to do this. And she said, it's great. I know that my management sees this visibility, and her choice in her career is to increase her output so she can climb the ladder. There's another choice that I advocate to people as well. Either is fine. And that is, if you increase your productivity 25%, you can work 25% less. You can theoretically leave at 3 every day or take Fridays off because you're getting done the same amount of work in less time.
I think you bring up a really important point, right? On the one hand, there's going to be the emergence of these super creators. And I envision those as being 28 to 33-year-olds who are going to learn how to do everything quickly and at a high standard. So if you ask them to do a news release, they will give you the news release, the web copy, the white paper. They will give you the email. They will give you the test. They will give you the PowerPoint copy.
The note for the spokesperson.
Right, right. And that individual will become indispensable. All of a sudden, they will have far exceeded the expectations of the organizations. And you'll become the CEOs, you'll become the shadow CEO, right? Because you know how to do all this. The second is, I do think we'll have to make a decision as a society that if these tools are really this productive, what are people going to do with their extra time, right? And hey, if they want to watch Netflix and play video games, that's one thing. But how about spending more time with your family? Or how about going on that 7-mile hike tomorrow?
Yeah, right.
Or how about making sourdough bread for the family? Or how about becoming a better volunteer, a better uncle, a better brother, a better sister? I mean, it's going to really bring up a lot of alternatives that I don't think have been in the marketplace. And I think at the same time, it's a tool for building self-esteem. And by that, Michael, I mean, this is a tough business to learn. And kids come out of college today. They've all had participation trophies, right? The hardest message you have to convey to a young person is it's just not good enough. We got to work on it more, right? Now, when you hear that for 4 years of your career, it's demoralizing. When you get back a heavily redlined piece of copy, when you can break through that and do it without the back and forth, I just see that. And this is something I don't see anyone talking about as a real augmentation to someone's self-esteem, that I'm of value. I'm contributing earlier in my career. I'm, the CEO depends on me as a 25-year-old person to write their op-eds for major daily newspapers all of a sudden, instead of, I take notes on calls. So there's a secondary value here. And that time we're going to have to decide what we do with it. And if it does take jobs, we're going to have to figure out, do we have a universal basic income? Altman's calling it a basic compute.
Yeah.
You get a percentage of total compute.
Can I give you my take on that?
Yeah, for sure.
I think it would be a really nice problem to have this be so successful that we have to rethink society. I have 2 reasons why I don't think that will happen, at least in your and my lifetimes. One is that technological adoption always takes way longer than we think. I remember 1999, when people first started streaming video on the internet, and everyone said, "Oh my gosh, TV is dead." And we're in 2024, and people still buy TVs, and they're still over-the-air networks. Obviously, we've moved a lot away from the old model of in 1999. And their streamers exist, but that's taken 25 years. The other point is there have been huge technological labor-saving developments in the past, and they haven't put us all out of work. The biggest one would be the shift from an agrarian society in the late 1800s. It was over 90% of Americans were farmers, right? And you don't have 90% of people out of work now. We all got different jobs, which are probably better. So I think something similar will happen, where the technology will enable new and higher forms of work that will be even more beneficial to society and, to your point about self-esteem, and still provide that sort of character building reward as well.
Well, I vacillate, right? Some days I think, when it does something really well, I think to myself, Michael, this is going to change everything.
Yeah.
And then when it needs a lot of work, I say, no, it's not going to change much.
Yeah.
But there's another reason that where you said that technology takes longer than we expect, right? The change management is extraordinary. I mean, to get change in my own firm with AI, first of all, I had to be the advocate. As the owner of the firm, I have to know as much as anybody in the firm about it. I need to address every question. I need to be a student of it. I need to set up a safe place where people can use it and be rewarded for great ideas, and to bring those forward and create this coalition of the willing, as I call it, those that really want to learn. And that's been the biggest challenge, right? And I'm pretty proud that I think we have 2 training sessions a week in AI.
Astounding.
And they're attended by 80% of the people in the firm. That's pretty good considering client calls and meetings and whatever. So people are really interested in it. I think the message has always been to my people is that I'm not doing this for me. I'm 63. This is my second act. I'm doing this to make sure that you'll have a career for the next 30 years. And I can do that by having you master this technology, right? And you'll go somewhere else and you'll have I'm sure, you're not going to stay with Gregory Essay the rest of your life, but God love you, right? You'll remember me and you'll remember what we've done for you, okay? So that's my second message. The third message is that you're going to hear a lot of negativity. And there's a lot of forces that want to be in opposition to this, right? Lawyers want to be in opposition to it because they've made a living off hourly billing. And if this cuts down on hourly billing, they're in trouble. So they're going to be bringing up copyright left and right, right? The media is going to be in opposition to this because the media wants to be the intermediary. They don't want any direct people, any direct whatever. Google's going to be in total opposition to this because it really does threaten search and the ways they have made revenue, and their slow adoption in many of AI arenas is testament to that.
Right.
And then thought leaders are going to want to be negative because they're experts, and if this ends the era of the expert, they're in trouble. And PR people are going to be in opposition to this because they want clients to think that there's some magic going on, right? They don't want to be transparent with the client because in the end, this is a grinder business, right? This isn't a lot of magic. There's more grinding, persistence,
right,
being able to take no's than anything else, right? So in that environment, change management becomes really important, something I've never faced before. And it's every day. You just have to be constant. I mean, we do a newsletter on AI, we train on AI, we give webinars on AI, we talk about AI, we challenge each other to use different tailored prompts, we share it with one another, and then you get buy-in, and all of a sudden people are coming to you with ways, it all starts to percolate up, where people come to you and say, look how I use this to show a client where their interviews went off track, right? Where they went off the talking points and a reporter would have eaten them alive. And they saw this in the finished product and they changed their approach, right? So it's a weird world we're in and it's transformational. And I just think what you're doing, Michael, is very important. And I want to thank you for that, right? I want to thank you for doing the transition to AI, because if we don't have people like you, a lot of these firms aren't going to be around in 5 years. I mean, I'm deadly serious about that. They will be acquired or they'll be gone because other firms will do it more productively, efficiently, and professionally. Those are my thoughts.
Well, I can say it, but when you say it as someone who's got skin in the game, it carries that much more weight to the people who matter, who, as you noted, are the CEOs and leadership. There's another, publicly traded communications head who talks all the time about how she uses AI just so that her team knows it's okay and that she won't be looking to replace them because they're using AI.
Beautiful.
And their team and your team, you haven't got to the point where you're like, oh my gosh, we've automated a third of our work and we don't need all these people, or even we can sign on a third more clients. We're not there yet. But when these types of changes come, like I remember advising a Fortune 100 Corp Comms department who was bad-mouthing social media. Like, why would you ever make a post and let people make negative comments about your brand and let that stand? That shifted virtually overnight, right? Within a year. And if you hadn't been keeping up on social media, you had a big learning curve. And that will be the same case times 10 when this shift eventually sweeps communication as we know it aside.
Well, to put a bow on that, I shared with you the case study about the crisis manual, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yesterday, the vice president who's on that account shared with me an email from the client that was glowing because that project was done in 2 weeks for them. And it was preparatory. They weren't facing a crisis. They just wanted to get their ducks in a row. And all the while, the rest of the work continued, right? So that's an example of increasing the velocity and the quantity while maintaining the quality, and results in a long-term client that says, please and thank you all of a sudden, instead of, where's that manual, right? So again, look, I want to thank you for being with us. It was a great segment. I really, really enjoyed it. I think, again, if we don't get this message and we don't connect and network with people who are inside the coalition of the willing, the naysayers are going to win. And that's going to be bad for the industry. I really believe that.
I appreciate you having me on, Greg. And yeah, let's help our communications peers be the leaders of AI rather than have some people from other industries come in and replace us because they're being augmented with AI.
Absolutely. We're the storytellers. We should control this and not IT or legal.
Amen. Let's go.
All right. Thanks for being with us, Michael. Great segment.
My pleasure. Take care, Greg.
Take care.
This podcast is a production of Gregory FCA. If you enjoyed our discussion today and want to continue exploring the transformative power of AI, please check out more episodes and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.